Welcome back to America's Retirement Headquarters. It is the home of the Retirement Guys formula and America's Medicare Associates with Scott Kerschner and Dave Ross. 419-794-3030 is the number. It's 419-794-3030 online, arhq.com. As I mentioned, every second half of the show. If you missed the first half of the show and you want to catch up, or you just want to check out previous editions of the show, previous topics, all available for you via podcast, wherever you consume your media, honestly. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Just search for America's Retirement Headquarters, all there for you to check out at your leisure. Now, previously, we were talking about Social Security. And with Social Security, the longer you wait to claim, the bigger your check. But what if you retire at 65 and you want to wait until 70 before you start taking your benefits? How do you fill that gap? How do you bridge that gap for those 5 years? An article suggests using your 401k as a, quote, Social Security bridge. Their argument is that 401ks run out. Social Security, it does not. Guys, what do you think of this strategy?
Well, I got to tell you, I love this topic. When I first came over here almost 6 years ago now with Nolan Baker and the team here, we started doing a lot of joint events. We would do a Social Security, and then I would come in the second half of the event and talk about Medicare. Because, Social Security and Medicare, you sign up for Medicare on the Social Security website, right? And one of the topics that they would talk about with the Social Security is this very issue. Taking Social Security off, maximizing your monthly benefit, and waiting until 70. And one of the things that I have found sitting in the audience and listening to this was I found it to be somewhat confusing. A lot of people look at their Social Security statement and it says full retirement age. And a lot of people look at that and say, oh my gosh, that's when I have to retire. No, that does not mean that's when you have to retire. So I wish they could change that verbiage, because it's not your full retirement age. What it is it's the time that you can start drawing Social Security and still make income without being penalized, right? So the other thing that they would talk about is putting off taking Social Security until 70 and maximizing your benefit. So I mentioned in the first half of the show about a client that I met with, and I want to tell you real quick this story about this client, because this is exactly the second half of that story. So I met with this client. They had approximately $550,000 in investable assets currently with Chaz, as a matter of fact. Of that, $135,000 of it was in a Roth IRA. So I was actually working with their health insurance and explaining to them about how that's going to work. So for 1 year, they're going to take any supplemental income they need out of the Roth because it's not reportable income. So then we started talking about Social Security, because he says, well, I'm planning on taking it at 64. His wife was already taking her Social Security. Okay, and she turned 64 January. So she was locked in at, I think it was like $1,100 a month. So some of the things that we do, Nolan Baker and Chaz and Dave, when they sit down and talk about what's the optimal time to draw your Social Security, this is some of the things that they'll ask you. So when I met with this client, they already had prepared what their monthly expenses were going to be. And I'm like, wow, you're way ahead of the game. So they hand me a piece of paper and they said, this is how much we need on a monthly basis. So I looked at their Social Security that she was getting, and then I looked at his, and I said, well, based on some of the assets that you mentioned you have, you might want to put this off to at least 67. Okay, because remember, he was going 64, so I was just looking at 3 years initially. Putting it off to 67 got him over $700 more a month for the rest of his life. So I was looking at this, and he said he needed about $2,500 a month for a 3-year period out of his investments. So I ran the numbers, I did the math for him, and taking some money out of his $550,000 that he had invested and showing him how to bridge that gap by utilizing the 401k money, putting off taking his Social Security is going to get him $700 more a month for the rest of his life. Now, the other thing that you guys all ask, and I even ask as well, is a lot of this has to do with genetics, right? So I asked him, I said, well, how about mom and dad? How, are they still living? He says, well, dad passed away. I said, well, at what age? 87. I said, how about mom? He said, she's still going strong. She's 92. So he's got some pretty good genes, right? So I then showed him if we could manipulate this to work for him at taking it at 70, that number was like an additional $1,100 a month. And if you look at that number over, get him to his dad's age, 17, 18 years, he was looking at making, several hundred thousands of dollars over the last 17 to 20 years of his life. And these things just make sense. I love working with people with this and showing them how this works and bridging that gap. Dave, how do you talk to people with this when this topic comes up, and how do you show them how the covering that gap would work?
I would say that I probably spend a lot of time discussing the concept of what full retirement age actually is, because if a person's going to retire early, and what I mean by that is prior to 67, I'm 66 and 8 months for Social Security.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you get to 66 and 8 months and you say, gee, I'm in poor health. My parents didn't live to be like this couple's parents. You might want to turn on your income at full retirement age. But you know what? If I'm 65
mm-hmm.
and I'm going to retire, I think you look at it in increments. So I'm looking at getting from 65 to 66 in 8 months.
Sure.
Once I get to that full retirement age, then I can turn on my Social Security and I have to worry about the penalty. I get to 66.8, maybe my investments have continued to chug along, and we can look at trying to get to 70.
Sure.
So it's not like you present it in the tone that, oh, you can't touch it for 5 more years. No, it's actually can be a year-to-year thing.
Mm-hmm.
So the only thing that's kind of difficult for me is when I meet with someone who hasn't really put a plan together, and they tell me that they've already turned on the Social Security.
Yes.
Because then I can't do anything. They're locked in for life, and you know what? I'm not going to tell them that they made a mistake, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give them a non-judgmental number of what they can count on in retirement, and hopefully it's enough to cover their needs under the independent income system. So, retirement plans have to be flexible. They have to be able to roll with the current situation. And we all know that current situation could change very, very quickly depending on health and other factors. So, yeah, it's definitely a moving target as far as when to turn on Social Security.
You brought up a really good point there, Dave. It's not. It doesn't mean if you decide, you know what, I'm going to wait until 70, and something changes when you're 68. Well, I said I'm going to wait until 70. I have to. That's not the case at all. I mean, anything you can turn it on anytime you want. Obviously you can turn it anytime you want after 62 years old. The longer you wait, you optimize that monthly benefit. So when we talk about this topic, and we absolutely have a non-bias approach to this, where we will help you understand what's going to be your best option. When I was done with this client, they said, "Man, this just makes perfect sense. You've completely changed our mind on this." And the other thing is, they've got the resources. They've got over $550,000 available to them. For them to take $50,000 of that and to bridge that gap is still going to leave them with, a $500,000 investment that is continuing to grow, and they're going to get $700 more a month for the rest of their life. So these are just some examples of how we work with clients when they come to us and ask, when should I take Social Security?
And of course, the question becomes even more muddied when you take into account a spouse, being married. There's more taken to play, survivor benefits, things like that. The average man lives to the age of 78 right now. So you may think, why would I wait as long if I'm going to be getting less years of benefits? That's one of the things that comes into play. The argument that the Social Security does not run out. So let me ask really quick, with the conversation right now being around the solvency of Social Security and potential changes coming down the line within the next 10 years, has that changed an outlook, the approach when it comes to the right time for people to claim Social Security?
I certainly think it factors in because they're saying at 2034 there could be a 20% cut.
Mm-hmm.
So here's something to think about if you're sitting out there listening to this. What if you delay Social Security and try to optimize it, which is try to get as close all the way up to 70 if you can. If you can do that, and then the government indeed cuts Social Security benefits 20% in 2034, that 20% reduction will probably put you somewhere in that neighborhood of what your full retirement benefit
Sure.
would have been.
Mm-hmm.
So it's better to be safe than sorry. If you can optimize, it's certainly something that it's a discussion that should be had with everyone. So yeah, it's a very timely topic as people start to make decisions about what's in their best interest in regards to their Social Security.
And again, it's not a decision that the people at the Social Security office can help you make. They are there to help you process the paperwork and show you what your benefits are going to be. You want to do a little bit of homework beforehand. Better yet, let the team at America's Retirement Headquarters help you with that and figure out with their unbiased, advice there and show you how it's all going to factor into play. 419-794-3030 is the phone number. The website, arhq.com.